Good afternoon. Today we are starting Try 2, which means we are in Book 2 of our math binders. So on the cover, you're going to want to make sure to put your name. You're going to want to make sure to somehow do something that you will easily see. This is Book 2. Put this first page on the front of your binder. Make sure that you can easily see this is Book 2, right? A big number 2 here, and circle it and put arrows pointing to it. Do something so you can see that quickly we'll see a difference between Book 1 and Book 2. We can see that we will be doing Co29 through Po45. This is our Try 2 binder. We will get a new one for Try 3. So these are all the objectives we are working on in Try 2. We're starting with Unit 5. We can see we're going to be working on ratios and working on proportions. So we're going to work on those together. And that brings us to our first objective of Unit 5. Co29 is I can write a ratio for a given situation 3 ways and in simplest form. So because technology is what technology is after a long break, it really doesn't like to work well for me. So we are going to be doing this with the document camera today. And I'm going to work after school to get it so we won't need to do this like this tomorrow. So Co29, first thing says, it says, what is the ratio? Because we are working with ratios in this unit, so we need to have our definition for a ratio. A ratio compares a part to a part. So that's the big thing we need to know about a ratio. It's a part to a part. So if we look at a bag that's containing marbles, if it has 6 yellow marbles, 8 blue marbles, 3 red marbles, and 12 green marbles, we want to write ratios part to part, and then we're going to show it's simplified, and then we're going to see the 3 different ways that we can write that ratio. It all means the same thing, it just shows up a different way. So if I want to write blue to yellow, I'm going to look to see where my blue are. There are 8 blue. It says blue first here, so I'm going to put that blue first here. So 8 to yellow has 6. So 8 blue to my 6 yellow. Knowing what we know about simplifying, what do you think we would simplify this ratio to be, Christina? Yeah, I can divide a 2 out of both sides. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 8 to 6, I'm going to simplify down to 4 to 3. Just like with our fractions, when we simplify them, you go as low as you can go. You have to be able to divide the same number out of all of the numbers, right? That same scale factor. So now I have 3 different ways that I can write it. The first one's using my words. 4, 2, 3. The next one, I'm going to use that colon, the 2 dots. And the last one is making it look like a fraction. That first number is the numerator, second number is that denominator. So those are the 3 ways to write a ratio. Using the word 2, using the colon, using that fraction bar. Okay. So, knowing what we know there, our next one is red to green. What would my first ratio be? David?
3 to 12.
Yeah, there are 3 red to 12 green. What would that be simplified? Amala? 1 to 4. Now I need to write it 3 ways. So 1 to 4, it is important that we always keep our numbers in the same spot. First number is always the first number is always the first number. You can't switch them. Because we know it's red to green, not green to red. So the order matters. It really, truly matters. If you flip it, it will be wrong. So if it's red to green, that first number has to be the red number. The second number has to be the green number. So we have that 1 to 4, 1 colon 4, 1 fraction bar 4. Blue to green, what would that be? What is our ratio, Luke?
8 to 12.
Good. 8 to 12. 8 blue to 12 green. What would it be simplified? Harper. Yeah. If I divide a 4 out of both sides, that brings me down to 2 to 3. Now I have to write it my 3 ways, with the word 2, with my colon, and with my fraction bar. What would yellow to red look like? Eleanor.
6 to 3.
6 to 3. What would that be simplified? Hadley. And I'm going to write it my 3 ways. 2 to 1, 2 colon 1, 2 over 1. We do not have to, we don't change those improper fractions to mixed numbers. Okay, it stays improper because it's part to part. It's not technically a fraction. It's part to part. So we look at it as that ratio. Our next one says red to blue and green. What do you think that ratio is going to look like? Christina? Yeah, we have to add that blue and green together. So we're going to look at red as our first number, so 3. And then 8 blue plus 12 green, 8 plus 12 is 20. So 3 to 20. What would that be simplified, Amala? 3 to 20. We can't go any simpler than that. So then I write it my 3 ways with the word 2, with the colon, and with that fraction bar. So I pointed out that this is a ratio, not a fraction. So how is a ratio different from a fraction? It looks like a fraction. I called it a fraction bar, but it's not an actual fraction. A ratio compares the part to a part. Does anybody know what a fraction does? What do you think, Vivi? Does that fraction bar means division? If a ratio compares a part to a part, a fraction compares a part to what? Vivi? To a whole. If we think about with those percentages that we were working on, I got 28 right out of 30. 28 over 30. 30 was that whole number, right? How many altogether? So that fraction is different in that that denominator is the whole. A ratio, it's a part to the part. The red marbles to the green marbles. Not all the marbles together. So that's the difference between a ratio and a fraction. So now we have some word problems to answer. And it says, put your ratios in simplest form. So if you do not simplify, it will be wrong. You are baking a cake and the recipe calls for 32 cups of flour and 42 cups of sugar. It's a big cake. What is the ratio of flour to sugar? So how would I write my ratio? What's my original ratio? Amala? So 32 cups of flour to 42 cups of sugar. Is that my final answer? Why not, Rocco? You said no. Why is that not my final answer? What do I have to do? I have to simplify. 42 and 32. What can I simplify that down to? Graham? 16 to 21. I can divide a 2 out of both sides. I'm going to circle my final answer. This does not say it, but sometimes we might see write the ratio in 2 or 3 different ways. So remember, we could write our ratio as 16 colon 21. We could write it as 16 to 21 and 16 over 21. All of those answers would work. If it doesn't ask for you to put it in multiple ways, you just have to put it in one. Sometimes it might say, write it all 3 ways. So make sure you're following the directions. Another thing to really be careful about is that we go in the right order. Sometimes you'll see something like 32 cups of flour and 42 cups of sugar, but it might say, what's the ratio of sugar to flour? So you really, really have to be careful. It's not always going to be the first number to the second number. You have to look at your question. If it said sugar to flour, I would have to put my sugar number first. There will be problems where you have to pay attention to that. So for every problem, check to make sure that you're putting the correct number first. Always check how the question is worded. Whatever the question asks for first is what you put as your first number. It doesn't matter what they talked about in the information. It matters on what they talk about in the question. Does that make sense? There will be questions like this bottom one. The boy to girl ratio in a class is 2 to 3. There are 30 students in the class. How many are boys and how many are girls? So what I would do here is I'm going to label it boys to girls, 2 to 3. I put my label on top so I know what each number stands for. If it's boys to girls, let me get that bigger for you. If it's boys to girls, that first number of 2 to 3, 2 is going to be the boys, 3 is going to be the girls. There are 30 students altogether in the class. Any guess on how we're going to solve this? What do you think, Graham? So Graham went up. He knows 2 to 3, 4 to 6 is equivalent, right? And he said, oh, 4 to 6 is going to be 10. I know I have to get up to 30. So to go from 10 to 30, I can multiply each of these by 3 and say, okay, 12 plus 18 equals 30. So there's 12 boys and 18 girls, because your final answer has to be equivalent with that ratio. The 2 to 3 is the simplified form. You have to go up this in that equivalent, multiplying by the same scale factor. So I like that Graham was thinking, oh, 30 is a multiple of 10. How can I get to it to equal 10? So then I can just multiply by 3. That is a great way of doing it. Sometimes it's more of a guess and check. If it doesn't make it apparent to you that it's not always going to be so simple and easy as a multiple of 10. So sometimes you might guess and check a little bit and say, oh, if I multiply by a 5, does that get me there? Oh, nope, that's too small. If I multiply by 8, will that get me there? But when they give you a total, you know that these two together, when you add them together, they have to equal the total. Okay, let's look at our second page. You're going to finish these two on your own on that first page. Our second page has more word problems. Again, putting your ratios in simplest form. So at halftime of your basketball game, the ratio of your score to your opponent's score is 7-4, and the sum of your scores is 33. What is the score of the game? So again, your score to your opponent's 7-4, and it has to equal 33. Well, what does 7 plus 4 equal, David?
11, and if you multiply by 4.
So if we add 7 plus 4, we see there's 11. To go from 11 to 33, what do we have to multiply by, David?
It's multiplied by 3.
So whatever I multiplied over here by, I have to multiply over here by the same scale factor. So what's your score going to be? Michael? 21. What's your opponent's score going to be? 12. So the score of the game is 21-12. Does that make sense? So let's look at the second one. This is the ratio of bottles of pop to cans of pop in a cooler is 4-3. There are 20 bottles. How many cans are there? So I'm going to label it bottles and cans, because I've got bottles and cans, 4-3. There are 20 bottles. How many cans are there? What am I going to do with this information? Where do you think I'm going to put that? If it's 4-3 bottles to cans, and I know I have 20 bottles, where would I put that 20? How do you think I can solve this? Eleanor? What am I dividing?
20 by...
Ruby?
I have 4 times 5, so that's 20, and I did times 5.
So that 20 bottles, I'm going to put under my bottles. So you could say 20 divided by 4 tells me what I multiply by, but Ruby knows her multiplication facts and says, well, I know 4 times 5 is 20. And if I multiplied this side by 5, what do I have to do to my other side? Multiply by 5. 3 times 5 is 15. So I know that there are 15 cans. So you put in the information that you know to find what you don't know. Does that make sense? I labeled it up top so I knew which side to put that 20 on. So I knew there were 20 bottles. It goes underneath the 4 bottles. So it's important to label so you don't make mistakes, because sometimes the numbers will work. Maybe it would have been 5 cans. That 20 could have gone on either side and we would have gotten an equal number. Make sure you're labeling it and filling in your numbers correctly. Does that make sense? So we're making sure to label correctly, to put our numbers in the correct spot, making sure that catching if they flip bottles to cans, cans to bottles, that we're catching those little tricks that they put in there. Any questions? Harper. So, the recipe for your soon-to-be world-famous mushroom muffins. That doesn't sound world-famous to me, but to each their own. It calls for 2 cups of mushrooms and half a cup of corn. In simplest form, what is the ratio of mushrooms to corn, and how many cups of corn are needed to increase the recipe by a factor of 6? All right, so my first thing, what do you think my first thing is I'm gonna do? Bradley? Yeah. I know that I have mushrooms to corn. So now I can say, okay, it tells me 2 cups of mushrooms to half a cup of corn. In simplest form, so I need to do this in simplest form. How many cups of corn, mushrooms to corn? So 2 to a half, well, we don't want a half. We want that half to go up to 1 whole. How do I get a half to go up to 1 whole? Christina? Multiplying or dividing? Remember, when we work with scale factors, we're not adding, we're multiplying or dividing, because if I add a half here, I would have to add a half here, and they're not going to increase at the same rate. So when we're working with that simplifying, it's always looking at multiplying or dividing. David?
You multiply by 2.
Yeah. To go from 1/2 up to 1 whole, I multiply by 2. Because if I have 1/2 times 2, that gets me 2 over 2, and 2 over 2 equals 1 whole. So if I multiply this side by 2, I have to multiply this side by 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. So this is my simplified ratio, is 4 to 1. So if you have that fraction in there, you want to bring it up to 1. So now, it says how many cups of corn are needed to increase the recipe by a factor of 6. So this is the simplified. Now I have that same mushrooms to corn, 2 to a half. And it says how many cups of corn are needed to increase by a scale factor of 6. Scale factor of 6 means I multiply both sides by 6. So cans of mushroom would be 12. 1/2 times 6 would be what? Harper? Harper. 3. 1/2 times 6 is 3. So I would need 3 cups of corn. So there were 2 questions. Simplifying it would be 4 to 1. How many cups of corn are needed if we increase by a scale factor of 6 would be the 3 cups. So it's 2 different forms. What are you looking for? Yeah. Does that make sense? 2 different parts to our question, 2 different answers are given there. All right, if you are watching this at home, I hope you are well. I hope you come see me if you have any questions. Remember, we have a couple of questions on page 1 and the rest of these word problems on page 2. This is a quiet work time. When you are finished, shh. Oh, I'm still recording and I'm still talking. When we are finished, you are working on any practice works to get ready for retakes on Friday. You are working on the math packets. So practice work and math packets. Take your time and make sure you're answering these questions correctly. So those watching at home, I hope you're well and I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.